Hello there, and welcome to Fixing the Sequel Trilogy, the Writers' Room podcast dedicated to fixing the Star Wars sequels. I'm Bryce Quinn, and I'm joined this week by Cole Forfang Phan and Carmelo Keating. How are you guys doing?
Very good, thank you, Bryce. How are you?
I'm good. Cole, how are you, man?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good.
Great. So, Sandro is once again out this week. He is still in Canada for the whole month. And Carmelo and I are both in the thick of moving house, so progress has been pretty slow recently on our rewrite progress. But that's okay, because we can still record the show and make things up and deal with the consequences later. So, this week is a bit of a deviation, as we've decided to talk about the politics of the Star Wars galaxy. We'll stick mostly to our usual structure, what Disney did wrong with politics in the sequels, what we liked, if anything, and then, towards the end of the show, what we intend to change in our rewrite. But before we begin, we feel it's a good idea to discuss our own personal politics and ideologies, as they will inevitably in some way reflected in our rewrite of the Star Wars sequels. So, the preamble is done. Let's get into it.
Yeah, this is kind of just a disclaimer, so you get a bit of more of a gist for us, and I guess where we're coming from. Also, just quickly, Cole, first episode.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, so that's
last
fun.
time it was Sandra. You're not Sandra.
No.
So.
Oh,
Believe it
okay,
or
cool.
not. Yeah. But yes, Bryce.
I will kick it off. So, Cole, you're going into film school this year?
Yeah. Studied music for 2 years and now switching.
And me and Mello last year graduated. Oh, you're going to be graduating soon from film school. I've graduated film school. So we're all arts students. So that leads us into an interesting political place because we're in Australia, or Brisbane, Australia. So I personally align very left skewed. I'm a queer ally. I'm a queer person myself. Believe in social justice. We believe in taxing the rich, all the kind of left-wing good stuff. I hate right-wing politics. I hate Fox News, all the stuff you hear from the States. And that's a pretty basic way of looking at it, I guess. If anyone in the comments who's listening to this, whenever that may be, is interested in discussing that, I love talking about politics, and Mello, you do as well.
Absolutely,
So
yeah.
we're more than happy to engage in that conversation in a healthy, constructive way.
Yeah. So I also lean quite left politically. I don't know. I don't really know how much to go into about it.
Yeah, I feel like you and I have talked a lot about this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
so I know that you and I are on a very similar wavelength, so most of my stuff that I said applies to you as well.
Yeah.
Unless there's anything else you want
I
to
just like talking about the economic side of things as well.
Yeah, see, I'm
always
less
really
about the
interesting.
economics. I hand wave that. I'm like, yep, tax the rich. I don't want to think about it because economics bores me to tears. But politics and like psychology and the psychology of like large groups of people, that's what I find a lot more interesting.
I'm a filthy liberal, so yeah. No, I would say I'm like fairly center left. I used to be like more center, like libertarian center, but like over the last few years, I've gone more and more left. And I mean, like, one of the big things I like propose all the time is UBI and like universal basic income.
Oh, we love universal basic income.
Always. But yeah, I mean, I'm big on the economics of it all. I think that's really important. And I think social issues are really important as well. And I'm all about freedom, America, all that.
So, getting rid of homelessness, poverty, that's the things that I care about, advocating for climate change. This is where we align politically. If you disagree with that as a listener, if you think that some of our beliefs are silly or misguided or stupid, I'm, interested to hear from you, again, in a polite, respectful way, if possible. If we can't have that polite, respectful discourse, that's something we advocate for just in general with this show. We want to create something good. We want to create a good community of Star Wars fans who want to create something, not just tear it down and critique it all the time. We obviously find many flaws with the sequels. We talk about them a lot, but we want to create something as well. So enough of our political soapbox, I think. I think that covers it pretty well, and I think people
get the gist now.
They get a very clear understanding of where we're at, and we've opened up that discussion. So maybe we'll come back to that another day when we actually have an audience. But for now, I think we're safe to jump into the show and begin talking about the politics of Star Wars.
Right.
So to begin, let's start with our Article 0, our overview, as we usually do. So original trilogy politics. George Lucas has been very open about his inspiration. The Stormtroopers, the Empire, is an analog for the American, presence in Vietnam. He's stated that publicly.
Yep.
Let's dive into that a little bit more with the overview. Mello, I'm pretty sure you actually know a lot more about that than I do.
I got a hell of an
nuts.
overview. So like this is like I got a whole page on.
Oh, we can cover it briefly,
like
or if you feel like it was.
No, it's fine. Yeah. So George Lucas, like the Empire, it's often drawn akin to being like the Nazis, to being like Nazi Germany, just because that's visually where the inspiration came from for uniforms and stuff like that. But it just came from a hatred of all empires, and he was calling out America, especially in
fascism.
And it came about in the Star Wars happened in the 70s.
Yeah, with the war.
After Vietnam War, and then in the wake of Reagan, and there's actually been inspiration for Palpatine taken from Ronald Reagan?
Reagan was post-Cold War. It's Nixon. Is called
Nixon,
Yeah,
sorry.
no, you're right.
President. I am not a crook.
Yeah,
President Nixon. Yep. he's talking about it being just simply this empire versus this smaller band of rebels, whereas he doesn't look at Vietnam as the proxy war that it actually was. The Vietnam War and conflicts in the Middle East.
So proxies is in like, countries in the middle getting caught up in conflicts and getting used as a proxy for the actual conflict, which is a lot larger.
Yeah. And all that shit through the Cold War. There were many conflicts like that through the Cold War where, rather than having it actually explode into real war with nukes.
Yeah, it's like, let's do it here.
Fights within other countries.
Cole, you got anything to add on to that?
No, not really. I think that's all a really good rundown of it.
Yeah, Mello, you love your political history and your modern history and that kind of thing. I'm much less.
We could take up so much.
we could delve into it more, but I think that's a good overview of I think George Lucas's philosophy and mentality. Writing the sequels and some of his inspiration for what he saw war as and how he wrote it into the story. He still wrote a family adventure film. I think that's important to remember as well. Like you watch the Clone Wars and there is a lot of like war writing and war themes, but it's still also a family adventure show. So keeping that in mind, I think, is important as well. But it has those themes, and there is that discussion. Anyone who says Star Wars isn't political is very clearly an idiot. So I think we can, put a pin in that one for now. Article 1. What didn't we like about politics in the sequel trilogy?
Well, you're saying, people who say that Star Wars isn't political, you can't take the politics out of Star Wars because then it's not Star Wars. So
it's entirely political. Like the prequels are so political. Yeah. Oh man, it's so funny.
JJ and Co had this approach for the sequels, or for Force Awakens at the very least, and therefore it set the tone for the rest of them. That if the prequels did something, that is the last thing they wanted to do.
Yeah, they very much did have that approach.
Yeah. So the prequels did politics, and they did it hard. They did it perhaps too much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and they wanted to avoid that where possible. They would think they were trying to follow the original trilogy guidelines of not having politics. To say the original trilogy doesn't have politics is
silly.
very.
It was just very subtle compared to the prequel trilogy.
Absolutely. Yeah. So to me, that's the big issue, is that
they're absent.
Yeah, they didn't know how to do politics.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I wrote. I just said no politics in the sequel. Like, how can I criticize it if there's nothing there to criticize? Right?
And war doesn't happen without politics. So.
No,
that's it is pretty much that simple. So Cole, you got anything else to add on to there? We've covered the very big.
Yeah, they
issue.
needed more trade routes. So
they're important, Cole.
Yeah, they
how
are.
you meant to get your spice.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. Fix.
Yeah.
So, Mel, I know you got some notes for Article 1.5, but is there anything else we can discuss about what we didn't like with the politics? It's a pretty broad, sweeping statement to say none of it was good. So, is there any specifics maybe that we can address?
No, we can. So, there is a quote from Lawson Tecker in Force Awakens, right, about the First Order when he's talking to Kylo Ren. He says, "The First Order rose from the darkness you did not." What the fuck does that mean?
I mean, he was born a Skywalker.
No. What is it? First Order rose from the darkness.
Yeah. How did they rise?
What does that mean?
Yeah. So some shadows got together and thought, let's make an army.
It seems to imply that they were like a loyalist sect of, Imperials or Imperial descendants and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that's about as much
it's
we get.
How do they get into the positions they are at the start of The Force Awakens, right? Because the First Order isn't this small thing. They have a whole bloody planet-sized Death Star, right? Which is bigger than the Death Star. How do they have the resources for that?
What's it called again, the big ship?
Starkiller Base.
Oh, sorry.
So you mean the Supremacy, though?
The Supremacy.
Yeah, the Supremacy also, that exists.
They have Starkiller Base, they have the Supremacy. Where did these things come from? They're unbelievably big.
Yeah, there's a lot of unexplained developments that happen. Like, why has the Republic moved their capital to Hosnian Prime? Where is Coruscant? What happened to that? It's all just unexplained, and you're expected to just think that this is how it is now.
Yeah.
When it really doesn't make any sense.
And they just, they show a tiny snippet of some New Republic, something we're told is the New Republic. Gets destroyed by Starkiller Base. They cut a cutscene. Leia had a spy inside, or not a spy. She had a person inside the New Republic who was representing the Resistance. And you see her, she's the key person you focus on when they go to Starkiller Base in that shot in The Force Awakens.
Yeah, right.
And she's
and she's looking up to the sky and
they deleted a scene with it.
Oh, okay. So they had a dialogue scene.
It might have, it would have been a little bit more where they're talking about it. But they don't even talk about the politics in that episode.
Yeah.
They do not. No, they do not. Yeah, but I think that covers it pretty well. We wanted to fire through this because we've got a lot to talk about now in our fixed pitch section. So Article 1.5, what do we like?
Things we like. Okay, so I've actually again, it's the same issue I keep coming back to, having read some of the books and comics and stuff like that. I like a lot of the stuff that's happening outside because that stuff is designed to fix all the plot holes and the inconsistencies in the movies.
Yeah.
So, therefore it has answers
We talk
Isn't it nice to
a
have
lot
answers?
about Bloodline on this show.
Yeah.
Because we think it's a great book. It is very well received in the community. It's very highly critically acclaimed as well.
Yeah.
It's a very good Star Wars book, and it has a lot of really interesting political ideas as well. So I know you want to
There's some great stuff in there. There's some great stuff in the Aftermath trilogy of books, which, takes us right up to the Battle of Jakku. There's more things in the comics. I think there's the comic Shattered Empire, which is like immediately after. In the storyline of the story mode of Battlefront 2.
Yeah, I've played that.
Yeah.
I play video games.
Yeah, but in that they talk about the Operation Cinder and the Scorched Earth policy that Palpatine instituted.
Yeah, that was good.
And then just, a whole smattering of other books. And now that Episode 9 came out, they were actually able to be like, right, well, there's our endpoint. We have to explain how Exegol happened. I don't know. I like a lot of the stuff. I don't like the fact that their key excuse and their key reasoning for how does the First Order come about from the Empire is they just hopped out into the unknown regions.
And then
they were just allowed to do that, and no one chased them, and they just, see you later, we're going to go reform.
I don't know if there's anything too big I like. I do like the general theme that fascism will rise again if you're complacent. I think that's a cool thing to explore in the sequels, but they don't really explore it.
It's there.
It's kind of the subtext, but yeah.
One thing I learned about this week, which I thought was really, really interesting. So you guys who know who Massar Meter is?
No. That sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah, okay, so go back to the prequels. Palpatine's like right-hand man, the blue guy.
Yeah.
With he's got the head tails and the horns.
Horns, yeah.
In the prequels.
And I think his one line he says in the prequels is, "Order!
Yes.
We shall have order."
Yep, gotcha.
Yeah, that guy, Massar Meter.
Okay,
he becomes the Grand Vizier
of
the Empire.
Okay, yeah.
After Palpatine dies.
Yeah, right.
So for the last year that in canon that the Empire exists.
Yeah.
And then he and Mon Mothma, who was the head of the New Republic, signed the Galactic Concordance to officially end the war.
Yeah, right.
After the Battle of Jakku.
And disband the Empire.
And to disband the Empire.
Interesting.
Also worth noting that after the Battle of Endor, the Rebel Alliance officially reorganizes into the New Republic. From that point, they exist as the New Republic.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So the rebellion specifically becomes.
Yeah.
The New
You know what the
Republic.
official name of the rebellion is?
What's that?
It's called the Alliance to Restore the New Republic.
That's right.
But not got rebellion
I think
in
you
it at
have.
all, yeah.
I think you have mentioned that. We call it the rebellion, kind of like outside of the story.
Yeah.
Because they are rebels. They're called rebels by
They
the
call
Empire.
themselves rebels.
But they're called the Alliance to Restore the Republic.
So goal achieved, they did that. But here's the thing: is that Mon Mothma was at the head of that. Not long after the signing of the Galactic Concordance, she got ill.
Yeah.
Had to take leave, and therefore, when the New Republic was formed, it just then descended into chaos. Became this two-party system that we know of as the centrists and populists.
Yep.
And that's how we can, watch shows in like The Mandalorian and see that and get told that the New Republic is
a joke.
Yeah, doing fuck all, because not long after it immediately was, and so for 30 years it did fuck all.
Yeah.
And therefore the First Order could happen.
So there is like some gaps. There are some things that work in this grand puzzle, this galactic-sized political puzzle.
Yes.
But let's dive into Article 2, I think.
Let's do it.
Because we have a lot to discuss. We've decided for this episode we're going to take it a little bit differently. I sent a message to you guys on Discord. I was like, we need to write timelines, each separately, don't tell each other, of what we think happened post Return of the Jedi up to The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
And the three of us are going to have very different ideas. I'm very excited to kick it off. Who wants to start?
Cole. I want Cole.
Cole, you've been quiet this episode so far. Let's
go.
Let's have you run wild.
I have like bigger, sort of more broader ideas, nothing too specific.
Go for
now,
it.
the first thing is we've mentioned Operation Cinder.
Mm-hmm.
In my vision, I don't think that would happen.
Okay.
Like, I feel like Palpatine's the type of guy who would leave a big grand plan despite him, right? And if he's making clones, why would he, blow up the Empire when he could take over the remnants and all that?
Yeah.
So I think after the Battle of Endor, it doesn't make sense necessarily that the Empire immediately secedes, collapses and all that. I think there's a long period of fighting against Imperial remnants like there was in the Legacy.
Okay.
Media and all that. So I think that goes on for quite a while.
In terms of years, like 10 years? Or...
I feel like it would be within like 5 years.
Okay,
like,
5 years.
So prolonged fighting, but it's quite clear that it's like a one-sided battle with the New Republic pretty much winning.
Yep.
I think one of the big things that would happen as well is then you would get a long period of trying to rebuild just the galaxy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the Galactic Civil War was a huge thing. So many resources went into it. How do you also repair all these planets that were absolutely brutalized by the Empire as well? Now, I think the idea of there's like a 30-year gap between
In canon,
yeah. I think that's fine. I like that. I also like that allows for us to see much older versions of our original trilogy characters.
Mhm.
But I do think within that period, the main thing that happens is obviously you get the problems that happened in the original Republic starting to resurface again. Obviously, corruption. One of the big issues with the New Republic is that they decided to be demilitarized. If you're demilitarized, how do you deal with things like the Hutts cartels, crime, all of that, right? And what happens when you start getting new movements? You say, hey, we don't like the New Republic. We want to go back to the Empire and all that. So through all this dissatisfaction with the New Republic, as problems start to arise again, it's run by people who probably didn't have enough political experience within a system where they had control, right? So people like Leia and all that, how do they operate in a new Senate where they've never had as much power or freedom anymore? I imagine they would make so many poor decisions, so many rushed decisions, although with good intent. And from that, you would have the Empire pretty much rise again, or the First Order.
Okay.
I feel. So a fairly broad picture of where it would go, which isn't too dissimilar from.
And at the beginning of Force Awakens, what would that landscape kind of look like for you?
So I think the way I hit the mic.
It's tradition for that mic, actually.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah, that's where Sandra sits.
Oh. I'm carrying it on.
Yeah, continue.
Now, I think where the sequels start with The Force Awakens, I think that's a good spot. Obviously, I don't think that the First Order would be as big as it is.
Yeah.
It's huge, and they never really explain that. I would like to kind of go from there, but show more of the rise of the First Order and how it actually gets to a much bigger spot.
So seeing that kind of rising political sentiment and people in the Senate giving power and weapons and that kind of thing to the First Order, saying we believe in your cause, we need a military.
Yeah. More people turning against the New Republic as well.
Okay.
I think so.
Mello?
Hi, how are we doing?
You zoning out there? What happened?
No, I'm here. I'm just in deep thought.
Alrighty.
And stuff.
You want to jump in next?
Yeah. Me? Yeah, I suppose. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. When I started to write my notes, started to write my timeline, I realized just how big of a thing this is. And I think I feel torn. I feel like I've written myself into a hole. Okay. So I'm the one who's raised bloodline.
Yes.
Because I think it's cool. I think there's a lot of cool stuff in there. But I'm thinking about it, and ultimately, the thing that I keep coming back to is I don't want this trilogy to be defined by regression. I don't want, the galaxy to just simply repeat the same mistakes. I distinctly don't want the First Order to be like the Empire.
A massive monolithic.
Yeah, I don't want it to be
force.
exactly the same. I think it needs to be distinct and unique. And I think, most importantly, the conflict needs to be distinct and unique. So I think I raised off camera last episode that I think in our version of Force Awakens, the announcement or the offset of war has to come at the end of that film.
Okay.
So I think that where we are in Force Awakens, political tension should be absolutely rife. It's the absolute boiling point, and just some Franz Ferdinand assassination-esque thing would tip those scales. So I've got to work backwards now. I like a lot of the stuff that happens in canon. I'm torn on whether or not to think of Palpatine as this mass strategist, because we go back to my Palpatine episode and I call him out and I say he's an idiot. Because he was so cocky, he was so confident.
We do have a lot of discourse about Palpatine and who he is and what we think of his character and stuff.
Means a lot. And I don't know, so I'm struggling to think of, okay, would he really have that much of a plan? I like the idea. I really like the idea of the Empire just being absolutely just descending into chaos. And the thing is, I'm struggling to find real world examples, because you can't draw this akin to anything. The Empire ruled the entire galaxy. You can't draw this akin to the fall of Nazi Germany or the fall of the Japanese Empire. The only thing that we could really do is to look at the height of the British Empire if it just fell overnight. Okay, but it didn't. That took years as well, So struggling there a bit. But I keep coming back to the crime underworld.
Okay.
We've spoken a little bit about the crime underworld in recent times, and I think that with the Empire gone, that would be the real issue for the New Republic to tackle. So let's just assume for a second in my version that, okay, the Empire is destroyed. We can bring a lot of post-World War II stuff into it where, there's kind of like a Nuremberg trials for high-ranking Imperials and, plenty of people turn coat. They see that the New Republic is rising. Now that the Death Star and the Emperor is gone, that confidence is gone. Planets start to turn in the canon as well, and shit goes sideways. But, the criminal underworld, once the New Republic has dealt with the Empire, outlawed them, put really, really high bounties on anyone who they've lost and trying to hunt them down, whether they got to go out to Argentina. Yeah. Space Argentina
and track them down.
I reckon there'd be so many bounty hunters on that.
That's actually a very cool point.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be a good
Let's
book?
put a pin in that one. That's radical.
Yeah.
Continue on.
And I don't want to use the cop out of the unknown regions either, We've spoken how do the crime worlds operate in the time of the Empire. And as far as I found from all of my research, it's literally just that the Empire allows criminal empires to exist so long as they're not a hindrance or they don't interfere with the Empire or Palpatine himself. So Jabba does work with the Empire. He tries to keep the Empire pretty happy, and then there's the whole Han Solo debate, and they're trying to work together to get him. That's a mutual sort of benefit there. We look at Crimson Dawn, however, in the comics, in the canon, which is taken over by Kira from Solo. She becomes like Maul's right-hand man, and then when Maul dies, she takes up that mantle of head of that. But she's also allied with the Rebels. Because she's allied with the Rebels, well, she's allied with Leia and Han and them. Crimson Dawn becomes a hindrance. Palpatine puts out a hit on her.
Is this EU or is this?
This is canon. This is all
canon.
canon
Okay,
stuff.
continue on.
So Palpatine tries to take down Crimson Dawn. In my version, I'm pitching that once the Empire is gone, there's no one to keep them in check. Sure, the New Republic is this new power, but the New Republic's focusing on the Empire. So I think that the criminal underworld is able to rise, and I like the idea that perhaps organize. Crime likes to be selfish and have its own little factions, but what if they were able to unite secretly so that over time, we're getting to this point where perhaps the key conflict in Force Awakens, 25, 30 years later, is how do you deal with this really growing, strong criminal underworld, which is, gone and hijacked and taken and stolen a bunch of old Imperial and old New Republic ships. And, we've had that thing where we're being like, oh, they've never had a capital ship. Yeah. What if the crime world, some crime boss had a capital ship?
Yeah, like what does their maximum power look like? How big can they get?
So I'm thinking about crime. I'm trying to draw it to real world stuff. And we're talking about proxy wars again. So I had another thought, especially for our trilogy. What if the key conflict was some sort of proxy war? We've got perhaps the crime world versus our New Republic, who is kind of still divided, not sure how to handle the situation, fighting within a system of planets. And I had this visual of like, you jump to hyperspace and you come into this system, and as soon as you're there, it's just a star field.
Like the sky above Coruscant?
Yeah. It's like that. It's just, littered by debris and absolute carnage, and you get out of hyperspace and you're shredded by blast of fire and stuff like that.
It's like a war zone of a star system.
Absolutely savage.
That's interesting.
And it would be something that I think we would, if I were to bring that up at all, it would have to be explored in episode 8 and 9 more.
It kind of reminds me of the system, the way they structured the prequels, where you have Phantom Menace, you have Attack of the Clones, and then between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, there is this massive war period. There could almost be something similar in structure to what we do with 8 and 9.
So I know I'm talking very broad purposes because this is just such a difficult thing, but
it is.
There's some thoughts that I had.
Yeah, no, great. Any other notes you want to?
Another quick thing. Sorry, from last week. So I didn't get to talk about with my Finn episode. I had so many notes for the First Order. I just wanted to say really quickly. I had an idea that the First Order was actually created as a organization that was good initially.
Okay.
That wanted to take in all of the orphans from the Civil War.
There's
so many people dying from the Imperial side, from the Rebel side, and just like. And then some dodgy, maybe one Imperial loyalist who's like maybe able to get away with it, escapes to space Argentina, is able to be like, thanks for your child army. I'm going to raise a cult now. And that cult is perhaps trying to service a purpose, a real world purpose of actually fighting the crime. They're actually doing something about it as the issue, because this person just really hates crime and it would be like, super xenophobic within the Star Wars universe. And the crime underworld in Star Wars is often linked to different races that aren't human. If this person's actually trying to fight crime with this army that they've raised, that could gain sympathy. If the New Republic can't do anything about it, here's this supreme army, which is like the Unsullied from Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting if you paint the First Order as almost like the Empire if they actually tackled crime. Like much more intense
heroes of the
Empire.
people. They definitely have selfish intentions.
That's interesting. That's kind of led me in a different direction, where maybe the First Order was started in a good sense of like, what do we do with all of these orphans who were like left orphans by this massive war? You collect them all together and you try and create something good out of it, and then it gets taken over Hydra style, like the MCU,
I like Hydra
where they
style.
infiltrate from the inside, and then it slowly over time becomes this imperial sentiment, this loyalist sentiment.
Bryce, you'll always win me over with Hydra style.
Hydra is cool.
The stuff in the modern Marvel comics with Hydra and Winter Soldier and all.
I don't know any of that.
Oh,
I like the movies.
Right. Okay. Well, that's where it comes from. I'm talking about those ones.
Okay. So my turn. We've gone through you guys.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to start Return of the Jedi. The war finishes and Project Cinder does happen.
Okay. Yeah.
But the thing that they're going for is not wiping out planets and systems and all that. It's wiping out information.
Yeah.
They want to kill all of history.
Yeah.
They want to wipe it all out, which I thought was just like a really interesting way of almost like the Blade Runner 2049 thing, where they're like, the Great Blackout wiped all our records. You know how easy it is to spread misinformation when there's no history?
Exactly.
That's terrifying to think about.
Yeah, so sorry. I just wanted to add that there's a reason like the Allied forces after World War II really documented everything. Like, think about how much Holocaust. Think about how much Holocaust misinformation is out there, right?
Yeah.
There is a reason that they recorded everything, took photographs, all of that.
There is also a man in history who is kind of partially responsible for everything not being destroyed, which I actually made a note of when we're talking about Hitler tried to he requested a scorched earth policy in his last days
right.
when he knew that
He was losing.
Germany was done. Albert Speer is the person he put in command of that, and he said no.
So what they do is they do Operation Cinder. There is massive fires and destruction everywhere. They're blowing everything up. A lot of what they're doing when they are starting these fights and skirmishes is it's like suicide bombing almost.
Yeah.
But it is almost a distraction.
Yeah, right, cool.
Yeah.
To get the information. Like places like Scarif, where there is this massive tower of Imperial records, that shit explodes so quickly.
They destroyed that.
Oh, they destroyed that in.
But I get what you mean. Yeah.
Places like that,
cool.
they just wiped out, and there's the Imperial faction. They had all the information.
Yeah.
So that's all gone now.
Yeah.
So when they're trying to rebuild the New Republic, all they have is rebel files.
Yeah.
And anything that they managed to collect together, but they didn't have the resources to keep enough information and to store all of that history. So any knowledge of the prequel era, of most of the original trilogy era, all of that gets wiped out. The truth about Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, the Sith, all of that becomes dubious. No one actually has any real proof that the Jedi ever existed, because there's only been 30 years of propaganda, or 20 years of propaganda, and then all of history gets wiped out, and you can't access it anymore.
Right, yeah.
So that's kind of like the basis of where I was starting. And then you get to the New Republic. They're trying to build it. They want to, what was the wording? Alliance to rebuild the
Republic.
Republic. So that's what Leia does. So Leia is heading that up with Mon Mothma. Once the Empire's been defeated fully, Scorched Earth Operation Cinder is stopped, and they sign the treaty. Pretty much very similar. You get to Leia building the New Republic, and my thought for her mentality is that she would be very keen to make it work. She's like, if we just try this hard enough and we do it well, we can create something like they had in the days of old that I heard about growing up, where they had the High Republic. They had 1,000 years of peace. That's what we want to make. And it doesn't work. I think that's the key to that's the key to my mentality for this is that you can't have the Galactic Republic. It doesn't work as a system.
No.
We saw it in the prequels, so we can't make something new like that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where my head was at. So Mon Mothma and Leia and Lando as well, they're just like, we need to try so hard to make this work. And honestly, it's an uphill battle. Can't work. She is not a populist. So I know that I double checked in Bloodline, she is a populist.
Yeah.
So in my version of this, she's not. She is a centrist. She's like, we've got to stick to the Republic. That's the whole point of the rebellion. We wanted to
Yeah, that's what they were fighting for.
So her character arc in the first movie, I'm imagining, is that she's like, okay, I'm realizing now the Republic doesn't work. It's doomed to fail all the time. We need a new system. Then we have our populists. So the populists are actually similar to the separatists in the prequels. They want to have everyone separate and manage themselves. There is honestly
but not for bad intentions.
Not for bad intentions. There's a kernel of good there. They want peace and justice in the galaxy, but they don't believe in the Republic because they've seen the Empire. They've seen the Republic. They've heard that the Republic failed, according to some sources. We need to do something different, and that's their solution. They want everyone to be separate, and that's a very appealing idea to a lot of politicians. They're like, oh, we can manage our own government. Brilliant. That sounds very lucrative to me. So it's appealing to a lot of people. Then in come the loyalists, and that's the beginnings of the First Order. There will always be people who are like, we love the Empire. We want to see ourselves go back to that.
Well, especially when you look at it as being people who profited. In that time, people who had power and influence, and also those people who are just about order, rigid structure and laws.
What I am obviously taking is neo-Nazis and espousing Nazi beliefs and getting it completely wrong. Because
oh my god,
they are so poorly educated and uninformed. That's exactly what this would look like too, with no information and no history. So they're just looking at the Empire and all of this huge symbolism and all of these ideas of might and strength and security, and they're like, we want that because the world we live in now is scary. It's born out of fear. And they spend, all of these loyalists well, we like the Empire, but the current political leanings, the people that we agree with in their beliefs, they're the populists. So we're going to take our Empire ideas, and we're going to shift them to align with the populists. And they begin to start indoctrinating these populists who there is a core of good idea to the populist ideology, but they start to shift it over time and drag it towards these imperialism ideas.
We make it more of an ideological empire.
Yes. So they're in my mind, they're shifting it so that they can get power and money from these populists who they align with politically. They don't want to have a republic that can turn into an empire, but they want to have money and power from the people who agree with them, that we need security in the galaxy and that the republic doesn't work. It's those two things, I think. We need security in the galaxy and the republic doesn't work. They can say that oh, cool. That's our key to get the empire back. That's kind of the alley that they want to use. And then over time, Hux, who is a populist, who is searching for good and security in the galaxy, he will get dragged down to become one of the loyalists.
Worth noting again, for anyone who wasn't sure, we have Hux as being not this bad guy.
Yes, we don't want him to be just a simple evil bad guy. We think
Yeah.
he's a really interesting political character, and we want to explore that.
Yeah.
And so when we do recast Donald Gleason, because we can afford him,
Yeah.
he gets to play a real character.
No, I want Colin Farrell actually.
You want Colin Farrell?
I'm joking.
Okay, we can bring him in somewhere else.
So I've got so that's kind of like my broad strokes.
Yeah,
Then we
yeah,
get to
yeah.
Force Awakens.
Yeah.
You want to jump in?
Can I ask you a quick question? You had you're employing the Scorched Earth too, which I like actually.
Yes.
I really like
if it
that
actually
idea.
still goes like I like Scorched Earth so long as it's real Scorched Earth.
Mm.
You know, not some people can escape.
Yeah.
Or not some whole squadrons can escape. Maybe some people, but like burn everything.
Yeah. I
really
like the
like
idea of
that.
burn everything. I think with the specific intent of creating a lack of information and historical truth.
Yeah, because then the New Republic would be fighting to not burn everything. We need your resources. We need people. We need your leadership to be able to command your people in this arrest period.
Yes.
But Coruscant.
Okay.
What do you envision happening to Coruscant?
That's an interesting question that I didn't think about.
Okay, right.
So I wrote down a list of factions. I wrote centrists, populists, loyalists, and then the crime mob.
Yeah. I have a really interesting thought I thought I'd bring up. Now, Coruscant, right?
Yeah.
It was the heart of the Empire. They probably never had to deal with any of the really bad issues in the Empire, right? So the majority of the base there would probably be Empire loyalists just by virtue of the fact, hey, we had life great there.
Yeah.
What was wrong with it?
Also, they would have changed Coruscant around. Not to say that Coruscant wouldn't have had their, underworld crime down in the lower levels, but it would have been much better than it used to be.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly,
Because it's
right?
like,
There wouldn't have been that same level.
Yeah.
it's a police state.
It would
of a
have been
planet.
like very much like if there's crime there, it is controlled by the Empire.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
they use it as a tool.
Exactly.
And when the Empire came in, so many new resources got funneled into the core world. So I think one of the interesting things we have in this new era, right, is the fact that we have a new liberal republic, right, situated in the heart of where the Empire's strongest loyalists were. What sort of a climate does that create, right?
I think it would be interesting if we are if we sticking with the centrist populist idea of it's the individual planet likes what they like. They either like the unity or they don't like the unity.
Yeah.
It's always been, you're right, this divide of inner world, like the core worlds versus the outer rim. If that just no longer mattered and it was just absolute chaos of, this space is they're populist, they're centrist, they're just everywhere. Fucking next door neighbors don't agree on anything. I like the idea of it being this massive time of uncertainty, which we haven't actually really seen in Star Wars. We've seen, it's war and there's people fighting and then and there's one big empire and we know exactly who's in charge. Whereas the world we live in is nothing like that at all. It's uncertain.
Well, I think the idea of the core worlds and then the outer rim and the mid rim and everything, that's a great shorthand of reflecting the distance between political power and money and then lack of money and crime.
Yeah.
That's a pretty clear and easy way of doing it, and I've always kind of liked that.
Yeah.
So I think we can. The idea of changing that up and making it so that spaces within the mid rim reflect more of the outer worlds or the core worlds, that's interesting too. I think it'll take a lot of work.
Yeah.
I do have more points if that's
Keep going.
okay.
No,
I'll
go
jump
for
back
it.
into it.
Yeah.
So Hux. So the populists are people like Hux and people who don't want Empire back, but don't believe in the Republic. They also believe that if everyone fends for themselves, there won't be any crime factions. So that's their populist ideal. So it's like, no, if they don't have the access that they do right now in the outer rim, where it's like all these worlds connected by crime factions, if the populism exists, the crime will decrease. That's their theory.
It's like,
which is wrong.
Your planet's got crime. Deal with your own fucking crime.
Exactly.
We don't have crime.
It's
Yeah.
like because it's insular, it's one planet's government. They'll be able to sort it out because the other planets won't access. It's like that's backwards, and it's such a lazy thought because it's like if it's out of sight, it's out of mind.
Oh
it's so
yeah,
far
it's
away.
ignorance would be a good thing to tackle there.
Leia can see that centrism is not working, but is holding on to the belief that if they just try hard enough, they can make it work because they spent so many years fighting for it and believing that that was the way that it should be and that the Empire was wrong. Struggling to hold the galaxy together between the growing crime factions and the populace. So crime factions, they have had, I think in a simple way to look at it, they've had 20 years to build.
Yeah.
So they are now huge, very powerful, and very hard to oust from the outer rim. And they, the core world's looking at the outer rim. It's like slavery is rampant, drugs are rampant, and they have complete control over that. Something needs to be done because it's injustice. The people who fought the rebellion are good people. They want to fight against injustice in the galaxy. So of course they want to try and outlaw these crime factions, get rid of them. That's why that conflict exists. So I think remembering that is important. That's why they want to get rid of the crime factions, why the crime factions are antithetical to the rebellion and therefore the New Republic. The loyalists, ex-Imperials and Imperial descendants, want to see the Empire return, but they deny it outwardly, obviously, and hate being called loyalists. I think that's something that I like because, I hate neo-Nazis. I see them hate being called that a lot of the time. Potential idea: the group is funded by Palpatine to sow discord through the Outer Rim and fuel the crime factions there. Sowing discord. And this, when you said proxy wars, I was like, oh, this actually connects to this very well, because the idea of Palpatine using the First Order, or whatever that they're called, to grow this discord and to give the crime factions money and weapons to sow discord in the galaxy and create these wars, I think could be a really interesting thing. At the start of The Force Awakens, they're not kidnapping children, but burning towns as a weapons test to sell flamethrowers or other weapons to crime lords. That was my inciting incident, potentially. It's just a new idea. There was something else there as well. Oh, yeah. People don't believe in the Force. Because of course they don't.
No.
It's mumbo jumbo, as Han Solo puts it. It's
weird line.
It's straight up magic. If you got told that magic existed and there was no proof and no history to back it up, you wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't believe that Palpatine or Darth Vader had these spooky magical powers.
Yeah, it's propaganda.
The only people who would believe that are the Imperial officers who had it happen to them and saw their mates get choked to death. But even then, I imagine during the height of the Empire, they would have been dubious as like, oh, Darth Vader doesn't have magic powers. That's ridiculous. He's just a scary dude with a laser sword. Yeah. But then, you see it yourself. You see him choke someone to death, and it's like, oh my God, I don't want to think about what I just saw because that's terrifying. I don't want to talk to anyone about it. That's the sentiment. So if you have that sentiment, and then if you have a lack of information, no one believes that shit is real.
Yeah. No.
So I think that's a really interesting place to approach the politics from in Force Awakens.
We have also spoken about there'd be like perhaps people like Lor San Tekka though, who are still like
old,
have that secret knowledge, who are like they think of it as a religion. And
yes,
they try to support it whilst not being able to channel
we've
the Force themselves.
Spoken before about common knowledge, and I think with this basis of lack of information and history, the common knowledge of people is that there was a big war and the Empire is super evil. Yeah. And now we're trying to build the New Republic and it's not working, and people are scared and tense because they just want the government to take care of them. Yeah. Much like in our world and society today, we want the government to take care of us.
People choose safety and easiness.
And security. That's why security is such a big issue for Hux.
Okay, counter proposal for you.
Go for it.
I'm all about I
think that's pretty much all of my notes. Sorry if that's
I like a lot of it. I'm all about trying to evolve.
This.
Yeah. I want there to be an evolution, and we're talking about, okay, so obviously the New Republic's trying to not make the same mistakes in the past. They're trying to learn from that. If we have some Imperial, loyalists, could it be the same thing? They don't want things to be exactly the same way it was, because I think maybe they acknowledge that, okay, even that could fail again.
Well, what are their plans?
I'm not too sure myself. One thing we haven't spoken about yet is the xenophobia within the Empire.
Yeah, I don't even know where that comes from, honestly.
So,
I don't know why that's a thing, other than the fact that, it's based off of, Nazi ideas.
Yeah. In Legends, the Empire was very canonically, xenophobic and misogynistic as well.
Okay.
One thing that Disney removed is the misogyny, but they have still got the xenophobia in there in a massive part because, they've enslaved people like the Wookiees and stuff like that. Side note, Han and Chewie liberated Kashyyyk.
All right, cool.
After the Battle of Endor.
Just so good backstory. I like it. Cool.
Okay, but it's not absolutely official, I don't think, in new canon that they're fully xenophobic. High up people are. Like Palpatine definitely is.
Yes.
And they'll go and enslave whole races that they are just they're strong. They're inferior. Enslave them. We need them for labor.
Is that it? Because it's like, the Wookiees are innately very strong. Let's, demonize them, dehumanize them, and turn them into slaves.
Yeah. Labeled as, No, they're not sentient beings.
Right.
We can enslave them.
So is it to create a workforce and then to, use propaganda to manipulate your workers to thinking that, for example, the Wookiees are not, humans, so that you can make them slaves and no one bats an eyelid.
Yeah. Soldiers and pilots and just people in general employed under the Empire, they're human, know?
Oh, no, for sure they are. I'm just curious as to, what reason that they give in Legends and that kind of thing. Because the practical answer of, we need workers, so let's, demonize them. Yeah. And then we can turn them into slaves and not pay them. That's, historically, that's been done before. So it makes sense. I'm just curious if that's actually something that's explicitly stated in Legends.
Post Return of the Jedi, we're looking at a galaxy that is, after the fall of the Death Star and the Emperor in Return of the Jedi, that a lot of planets of the non-human species would have then rallied behind the New Republic as well, like they already did. So the rebellion is full of non-human factions as well.
I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So what sort of galaxy are we living in post that? How many aliens have been killed?
Yeah, how many species have been wiped out and that kind of thing. Yeah. Because they do commit genocide, the Empire, right?
Yeah, multiple times.
So yeah, I think that's interesting as well.
I don't know. That'll play some role.
Yeah,
somewhere.
Yeah, and I wonder if a lot of those planets who were subjugated by the Empire, if they would be skeptical of the New Republic as well. If you were just freed from the tyranny of this big empire. Would you want to go into a new one, right?
Like you want to be taken care of, but do you want to be taken care of just to self-govern?
Yeah.
Would they be
I think
populists?
they'd want to, much like what we see today, they'd want to see themselves represented in the Senate. They want to make sure their people and their race are represented in the Senate.
But they don't want to be dictated by someone else's laws either.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, so it makes sense they would also be populists
as
well, so they can be insular. And,
Yeah. Maybe so maybe that's one of my proposals for these imperial loyalists is that perhaps like they need strength in numbers so as to not repeat the mistakes of the past of angering anyone who's not human. Maybe they're just not xenophobic.
I mean, maybe hey, look, we've got alien friends now. We're not Nazis.
Bad people.
We're not bad.
Oh, that sounds familiar. I love that. That's brilliant. Okay, well, I think it's right about time that we hear from our good friend in Canada, Sandra.
Oh,
Carrion.
yes, please, yeah.
So we have an 8-minute video that we're going to play out. Maybe this won't work in the edit. Maybe it will.
Well, you might just have to take the actual file and put it in rather than playing.
That is the plan.
Yeah, right. Cool. How good's his audio quality on that?
It's pretty good.
Okay.
I should have tested this earlier, honestly. So we'll see how this goes. But I'm going to play it so you guys can see it and try and point it so that the camera...
Oh, my God.
The microphone picks up the audio that we're playing out. It's very good.
Look at this thing.
If
it's sent through Google Drive, can you go full screen?
I don't think I can full screen it. Sorry, boys. Just gonna have to watch it in this tiny little screen.
This is a distant echo from Sandro. I'm in Canada still at the moment, and today I'm calling in about politics. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get out of the cold for this one.
He's edited this.
Okay, so I'm gonna try breeze through some of these so I don't hijack the podcast. So starting off, the Jedi's role and what their reputation is in the galaxy. I noticed last week the subject came up. My general idea of how it would work, and I guess my fixed pitch would be that the Outer Rim, think of the Jedi more as legends. They know that the Jedi used to exist. They haven't had much contact with the Jedi. They know that they're wizards that can pick up things with their minds. They have laser swords and they can control people with their minds. And that's all they know, and it's give or take. What's your opinion on that? Do you like that? Do you not like that? That's sort of the Outer Rim's take. And maybe Rey grows up and sort of thinks that's cool, or maybe she grows up and she thinks that's not so cool. But that's how I think the sort of word of what the Jedi are would maybe be in the Outer Rim. Within the more central worlds, I imagine them being a bit more torn. I think that they've had some experience with the Jedi, and it's more of a situation where people either give into the past Imperial propaganda or they don't. So do they believe that everything that they heard about the Jedi from the Empire is true, and are they taking that verbatim, or are they, going with a more Republic idea of what the Jedi were? That's how I imagine it sort of operating within sort of the more central planets. And then the political involvement of the Jedi. So this is where I wanted to get to, because this is sort of where my pitch comes in. I had this idea where, to avoid the past mistakes of the Jedi Council, Luke is keeping the Jedi as far separated from politics whatsoever. Maybe Leia wants him to come in, but he's refusing to. We can turn this into having this messaging about
misgivings of the Jedi in the past was being linked to the Republic
happening. And I think we can use this messaging for both and Rey. And I think the Jedi being not involved with politics is known around the Senate. The Jedi are not taking any sides. This is a different Jedi Order. And I think Luke would be public about that.
There'd be plenty of people who don't like that they don't answer to them, these super powerful wizards,
So that's sort of my pitch for how Jedi are sort of seen throughout the galaxy. One topic that I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on in the episode is how the First Order's centrist ideals are receiving such a good reception considering the galaxy's in a state where they're trying to avoid imperial ideals. In the sense of the New Republic is trying to avoid the mistakes of the past, trying to avoid legislation that seems imperial. So what is currently happening within the galaxy that make the centrist ideals that the First Order are promoting so enticing? Is it their marketing? Is it the corrupt state of the New Republic? What are the problems going on in the galaxy that are making the First Order seem like the better option? Melo's been rather forward about this in the past, that when regarding the political state of the galaxy, we've been taking some inspiration from Bloodline.
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's our favorite book.
And a lot of the canon stuff regarding Leia between the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy. And one thing in the old treatment that didn't quite work with me was the fact that Leia being Vader's daughter completely drives out the political sway of the populace. And I thought that was kind of ridiculous. And I went back and I looked at the canon, and it's not exactly how it works.
It's just a first draft, man. Jeez.
The centrists and the populace are two major but unofficial ideals within the New Republic at the time, and although Leia loses her political position due to the Vader revelation, the Populist Party moves on regardless. Leia was in the running to be a representative of the Populist Party, and essentially just after the whole Vader is her dad thing, lost all her political sway. But no matter what, the Populist Party was still in the Senate and it was still going strong. And I guess where I'm going with this is if we're going with that, and there is such an even tide between the centrist ideals that in our version the First Order is pushing and the populist ideals, it sort of makes no sense for the resistance to sort of spawn out of nothing and be a small guerrilla army like in the original trilogy. If we look at the Clone Wars and we see Separatist Republic and we see this as like a 50-50 fight, and we see the fight in the original trilogy with the Empire and the Rebels as more of a 80-20 fight, then I think that in this new sequel trilogy, I don't really want to go back to the guerrilla fighting. I think it'd be more interesting to see people that have sided with Leia in the past, as well as other populist supporters, siding with Leia, leaving the New Republic, and aiding her force for a new political system in the galaxy. Which leads me to think that in the second films, we'd see a 60-40 split, with the New Republic having a tiny bit more power over Leia's resistance. And then by the end, we can have some like cool, evenly matched fights between the Resistance and the New Republic. That's my general fixed pitch. It feels weird to go back to guerrilla fighting, especially when the political system seems to be so even between populist and centrist ideals. My final point's a bit of a ramble, so I'll try edit around it as much as I can for you guys, but essentially, it's sort of like I've always seen Lucas implementing politics into Star Wars. He always shows corruption, like with the Republic and with the Empire. And it seems like this time we're showing the corruption of the Republic again. But my question now is, where does it end? I had this thought running in my mind, and I thought it'd be boring to end on a utopia. I thought that after we're doing all this stuff at the start of the trilogy, showing what the Populist Party is and what Leia's trying to do, and then having the New Republic get completely corrupted by the First Order, that we'd end with the state of the galaxy that Leia was fighting for in the first movie. Essentially, my fixed pitch is for the ending political state is that we can any higher authority, any chancellor position, anything like that, and we take the Senate and we shift it into a council of representatives for each planet, something a bit more akin to the UN.
Which doesn't work.
The reason I think that this is an interesting way to go is it's a state that we've never seen the galaxy really in before, and it's a political system that both have, in my opinion, its own strengths and weaknesses. I'm not saying we're not going to write more after the end of the trilogy, but there's potential for interesting stories post our story to go somewhere. And I know that's not really the purpose. The purpose is to write a cohesive trilogy, but you still want to end with the galaxy in an interesting position, in my opinion. My final statement is that no matter what the ending political state of the galaxy is in, I don't think we should see much of it. We don't really see much of the Empire after the end of the prequels, other than Vader looking onto a Death Star. And we have no clue what the political system preceding the Empire is at the end of the original trilogy, because the main focus is on our character's journey, and that's really what the story is about. Obviously, my feedback right now is looking in the much wider scope, instead of focusing on the first movie. But so yeah, that's everything I could fit into hopefully a short amount of time. I can't wait to hear the playback of the episode, and yeah, until next time, see you later.
He does
Didn't say may the force be with you.
I thought he would, and he didn't. So that was our 8-minute video from Sandro from Canada.
Good.
That's his political takes. So first point, he doesn't want there to be guerrilla fighting. He wants it to be more equal. I think we can.
Absolutely.
Agree.
Yeah.
like
It'll make for a more interesting war, and a war that's not fought between two really cheap means. So clones means of production were destroyed
Yeah.
I'll say that that's canon, and I want to keep that the Empire destroyed that. The ability to clone. And droids, we just proved that well, that's how you lose a war.
Yeah.
They're cheap.
So we have just like human soldiers that are
people versus people. Make it
make it more personal.
No, I like that a lot. And then you could even like maybe have a scientist character who is trying to rediscover cloning, almost like rediscovering the super soldier serum in the MCU. It's like we've got to figure out how to clone again, and it's like someone working on it. Maybe they crack the code as well because they know that it happens. They know that people exist, that clones exist and stuff.
I think I want to just reiterate something personally, at least for this in general, is just I just think it's really important that we're not having the conflict and some of the ideologies, at least, just not just be repeats.
I think Sandra brings up an interesting point. It's because to me, it seemed like the question was almost being asked: what is the point of this conflict? What is the story?
Yeah,
George Lucas had something to write about.
Yeah,
to me, and we've grown this story from us just rambling about how much we hate the sequels.
Yeah,
what did the sequels really have to say? Because now I think I have something that I'd like to say.
Okay,
we've got this war that has existed, and I think this is just talking about the war stuff. We've talked about theme before, but this in just the war and the grand strokes of it. We had this huge war. And in our world, we've had the world wars, and we've had the Vietnam War, and we have these conflicts in the Middle East. And now we're going into the 2020s, and we're seeing a lot of loyalists, really, from these older political systems who are super loyal to the way that it used to be and wanting to continue things. They like war. They like military funding.
Yep.
And a lot of other people don't like this. People like us hate military funding. We want to see a world full of peace and love, And I think an interesting story for me is the idea of the fallout of massive empires and massive political systems and how that fallout affects and changes the next generation. And I think that's a story worth telling. And I think not, exactly having a copy of guerrilla fighting and underdog fighting and having it be something that is more equal. Can reflect that in an interesting way.
I know that history can repeat itself.
Yes, of course.
Because of the Treaty of Versailles, Nazi Germany was able to rise, and so you had Germany being this major superpower that we have villainized in World War One, and then they were doing really terrible shit. World War Two. You got this point now where you look at Russia, right? So it's like, okay, so Berlin Wall and the USSR fell 30 years ago. What are Russia doing?
Yeah,
right now they're trying to reform the USSR under Putin,
Russia's
who was a
invaded
KGB person, because he's just he's a person who's been able to carry on from his old ideology. I don't know. I think there's the distinction, perhaps, is if history is repeating itself. When history repeats itself, the rest of the world approaches it differently.
I think I'm looking at it not in the sense of it repeating itself. I think a lot of our overall theme that we talk about is the idea that, like, and in the Force as well, that evil is a constant and it is outside the natural balance.
Yeah.
No matter what you do, the corruption of evil will overtake everything.
Yeah.
And you can see that in war as well. They fought so hard to get the Republic back, right? And then they realized this system we were fighting so hard for doesn't actually work, and the thing that they were doing in the prequels didn't work. Yeah. So now we have to try and figure out something new.
Well, one of the big thing. Well, sorry if I
go for it, man.
Going on a tangent, but one of the big things I'm liking about the story is the idea that polarization can destroy liberal democracy. Mm-hmm. And like one of the things we're seeing is how, as these sides start to dehumanize each other more, they stop communicating, they start viewing each other as the enemy, you get this repeat.
You get war.
Exactly. And I also like the idea that people trying to form a free government that supports people, supports human rights, it's hard.
Yes.
People will want to remain complacent in safety, security, all of that.
And especially when it's led by people who profit from that system.
Exactly.
Because greed is a huge driver of everything we see in the world today.
And even then, there are so many, moderates in this galaxy who would, just prefer it were easy and go back to the old ways, right?
Yes.
So I like the idea that the message really is it's hard to fight for utopia, even though obviously utopia isn't the right term.
It's impossible to achieve, but you should always strive to fight
for it.
And the message we're going for.
Yeah, and it's never the easy option.
It never is. Yeah, I think that's a lot of what we've talked about so far. And yes, it is very lefty. It is very wishy-washy. And I'm sorry for anyone who doesn't like that, but that's
Star Wars.
That is Star Wars. It's a hopeful message. It is wishy-washy. It is incredibly hopeful and almost cringe when you think about it in these terms. And George Lucas had these ideas. I think we want to create something that feels like George Lucas wrote it.
Yep.
And if we're writing for what George Lucas might have written in the 2020s, maybe it would look something like this. Anyways, that was a long, long political spiel from, I think, the three of us and from Sandro in Canada as well. What an episode. Because I think the reason I'm breathing like this is because I think that a lot of people might hate it. And hate our political takes,
that's like as soon as you get into this stuff, they hate it. But
it's
if we can make it make sense within the world of Star Wars, I don't see how you can hate it.
I think what I want to come back to and reiterate. Cole, you go first.
Oh, sorry to interrupt, but yeah, I think one of the big things is when you're handling political messaging and story that it doesn't get preachy, right? Like
That's exactly actually what I was going to say.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, I'm a big Doctor Who fan, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I know a lot of people complain that now it's like, oh, it's really political, when in reality it's the most milquetoast political time in Doctor Who ever. It's bland, there's no actual message behind it.
Yeah.
But people are kind of right that they feel it's too preachy, right?
Yes.
So, like, one of the things Doctor Who used to do so well is, it handled actual philosophical conversation, debate, and all that.
Yeah.
And moral and ethical questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's, when it comes to political storytelling, I think that's one of the most important things you can do, especially when art really is about communicating ideas.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's all like the way that we're telling this, because it is Star Wars. It's all analogy. I don't think we're not gonna have dialogue where you're gonna.
We just say and looks at those Nazis are real bad, aren't they?
Yeah, within
we don't
ourselves,
want to do that.
shit like that.
We're talking about this
model,
because we want to have a good foundation for writing and
Yep.
creating a living, breathing world. And they talk about a lot in writing classes, creating that. So
Yeah.
for us, this is a discussion that's important. But if you're worried that our writing is going to be something that is incredibly overtly preachy and political, I mean, we're going to try and not do that because we hate writing like that.
Yeah.
We don't want it to be overtly preachy and political because we like writing where it is subtle and it's well done and the meaning and message is communicated. It is presented, not told.
Yeah.
Like that's the stuff we like watching and listening to and reading. So
Yeah.
that's what we're going to try and make, and that's why we're making this episode to try our best to make it.
Yeah.
So hopefully that is a good enough excuse for an hour and 10 minutes
Yeah.
of political rambling.
And just before, because I know we're almost done, I just want to make sure. I feel like we've ticked all the boxes, but just wanted to make sure we spoke about sperm today.
What? What?
In world building, sperm is an acronym for social, political, economic,
Yes, it is.
religious,
Oh my God.
and military.
I have never heard that in my life.
We need to talk about sperm.
That's so funny.
So thank you to my
Yeah, that's
roommate
right.
James for reminding me to include that.
Oh, roommate James
God.
always making a good appearance on the show.
Always.
With his great thoughts and insights into
Yeah.
the world around us. That's fantastic. I've never heard that.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Anyway.
I think very quick Article 3. I think we've decided
yeah,
on some
yeah.
really important stuff today with our politics and our world building.
I think
So
that's- yeah.
we like the pitch of using Operation Cinder. I think I convinced you, Cole. That
Yeah,
there are
I
some
like-
cool ways to use it.
I like it when it's not
Scorched
so
earth. Yeah. We
over
still
top.
have more work to do with Palpatine, but I think
Yeah.
we start with Operation Cinder. Getting rid of all the information and
Information
history
is
of the,
key. Yeah.
of the galaxy, the
Yeah.
Star Wars galaxy, so that people don't believe in the Force, Luke Skywalker, the stories of the rebels. It all becomes dubious. So when you get to the question of the populist versus centrist, I pitched that Leia should be leading the centrists because that's what she fought the rebellion
Yeah.
for, was to rebuild the Republic. They have the New Republic now, and it's not working.
Yeah.
It's faulty. It always was, and it
Yep.
always will be.
I'm pitching that the core conflict that they are actually having to try and, figure out a solution for that is causing so much infighting is crime
Yes.
underworld, and how that is being able to freely exist and has had free reign for almost 30 years.
And I pitched that the loyalists funded by Palpatine and whatever influence he may have on the story
Yeah.
are inciting that conflict
Yeah.
and giving them weapons and power
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that
yeah.
they can build that conflict
Yeah.
in the
I wanted to ask a question about the loyalists, right? Would they be a faction within the populace? Because I
Yes.
think if it's a two-party
I think
system,
so.
right? Yeah, because if you look at even like the American political system, right? You get these two big parties, and then there's all these little factions within really having to push for their own beliefs, right?
Yes.
And one of the interesting things about that, is like we saw recently with the vote for the Speaker of the House, you can have these very minor holdouts in the party asserting massive influence to push in like more extremist ideals and stuff like that.
Yes.
So I think it'd be really interesting to really explore that with the problems with the two-party system.
I agree, and that's where I was going with the loyal stuff as well. So I think that is kind of the area that we're shifting into now, with the loyalists trying to affect the populists in that way that you just described, so that they can cause this conflict between the centrists and the populists in the government, and Leia is right at the heart of that.
Yeah. And your final notes, thoughts?
Yeah, I'm loving all of this, and I think one of the great things about this is you're really honing in on the themes right now. And I think as that's becoming more clearer, you get a clear image of where this trilogy is going to head.
Yes.
And I like that the big thing is you're finding a new way to differentiate it from the sequel, or not the sequel, sorry, the prequels in the original trilogy, which in my opinion is the big flaw of the sequels.
One of the many.
Exactly, yeah.
I think that's something we've always talked about as well. It's like, how can we do political war stories without retreading the ground of six movies and a massive TV series, multiple TV series,
Yeah.
and without retreading any of that ground. And we're going to retread some of it, but we want it to feel original and unique. And that's what we're trying to do. So hopefully,
So that was, it was a pretty good first episode for something we're definitely gonna have to come back to.
Oh my god, yes. This is the
Yeah.
first of many political discussions, I think.
Yeah.
But I like what we've talked about today. I like what we've
Right,
gotten to.
It's been good.
And I hope you, our dear audience, has enjoyed it as well. So this has been Fixing the Sequel Trilogy. This has been our political episode. Please let us know what you think once this show comes out and is available to listen to. We're super curious to hear the thoughts of the audience because this is definitely the direction we've always wanted to take the show in. So it's kind of the first time we've really dived into this part of our writing and our philosophy for this series and podcast. So we're hoping that it's well received because it's kind of core to who we are and what we want to make. So anyways, enough wishy-washy bullshit. Let's end the show. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, may the force be with you.